Shouldn't we sing a song first, lined up like
One,
this?
2, 3, 4.
Ta-da-ta-ta. Harold, a lot of us know, because it says so here, that you were very stage-struck as a boy, and that you actually began to appear professionally at about the age of 12. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Jack. In the Midwest, in Omaha, I played on the stage. At 12, I played the part of Little Abram in Tess of the D'Urbervilles, and in Nell Gwynn, several other stage plays, and I did everything that you could think of, from call boy in a burlesque show, and usher, and candy butcher, etc. I think they did come in handy, yes.
This is The Man in the Glasses, the official Harold Lloyd podcast. I'm your host, Brad Eastridge. As a kid, Harold Lloyd got bit by the theater bug and found a love of performing. So did Tommy Murray and Hayley Everitt, a UK-based comedy couple, who are bringing Harold Lloyd, Mildred Davis, and a litany of silent comedy legends back to the stage to introduce them to a whole new audience. From Yorkshire theaters to London's Cinema Museum to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Tommy has played Harold and Hayley has played Mildred, and Snub, and Bibi, and Hal, and Jovina, and more across the United Kingdom in Against the Clock, a Hooray for Harold Lloyd show. And now they're looking to take their show international. They talk to us about their own journeys growing up with silent comedy and the way their comedy heroes have shaped their careers. With Tommy, it was Lloyd and Chaplin, and for Hayley, it was Mabel Normand. How books like Steve Mass's Slapstick Divas helped inform their passion for silent comedy. How their theatrical training in mime and dance informs their work. And how the show has changed to fit their own evolving story. You can find them at Instagram.com/Harold Lloyd Show, and links to their work are in the show notes. Before recording, we were talking about TikTok and what a good platform it is for introducing people to silent comedians. And now they're finding new ways to connect with crowds in the freshest way, through live performance. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in silent comedy and how you met?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we both started studying together in 2013. Yeah. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a long time ago. Not as long ago as when Harold Lloyd made Safety Last, which obviously at time of recording we're celebrating its 103rd anniversary, as well as kind of marking the fact that we set up, or rebranded, I should say, Falls Talk Theatre on this day a few years ago. But yeah, we met at college, both kind of studying musical theatre, and I guess that kind of background in musical theatre, kind of overlapping, linking into kind of variety and, you know, what you guys over there would call, you know, vaudeville.
Absolutely.
You know, through kind of dance and physical theatre and clowning, we've been able to literally get married. And
to add on to that as well, after college, when we went to university, we then studied more of a sort of European theatre style, which is more like mime and clown and physical theatre. So this is really where we started to hone our skills in clowning. And I was saying to Tommy that when I was very young, at nursery school, we had show and tell, and every week we'd have to bring in an object, and I would bring in a clown nose. And I was obsessed with this clown nose from the age of about 4 or 5. So that's definitely been in my blood since I was a kid. But for me, like primarily studying, as Tommy said, in musical theatre, I have that sort of dance background. So a lot of our work that we choreograph, all the slapstick moments, have to be really precise and something that I'm really passionate about. Also, just to add, I just remembered something. Tommy bought me a book on Mabel Normand a really long time ago, and I was really interested about women in silent movies, and this kind of sparked my interest. And then obviously with Tommy's love of Chaplin as well, like he said, we kind of put our ideas and passions together.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think there's so much more to explore. I mean, we've been touring and developing this show now for since 2023, since the centenary of Safety Last. But all of these ideas and all of these worlds, even just us having a chat today, as Hayley just mentioned, one of the books was a book on Mabel Normand, and another one of the books that I bought Hayley for her birthday was actually a book written by Steve Masser, who I know you've also spoken to on the podcast. So these kind of ideas kind of marrying together, and also, as Hayley said, the importance of the kind of the female voice within not only silent film, but also, certainly in Harold Lloyd's world, the fact that, as you were saying, I think just before we kind of started, on the record, the fact that, as you've spoken to Suzanne Lloyd on the podcast, her voice as a figure celebrating and carrying on that legacy, it's so important, just as much as B.B. Daniels or Mildred Davis and others that appeared in Harold Lloyd, and and obviously all of the other characters in the films of others, Chaplin and Keaton, etc. So that's sort of the world that we're in, and hoping to share it with you one day in the USA.
We really hope so too, because what's really innovative about what we've been talking about over emails about what you do is how you kind of weave your own lives into interpreting these classic movie characters. Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I mean, it started off initially, it was in 2023. It kind of came from a place of writing. I was writing it as a solo show. A lot of the shows, the theatre shows, and obviously that being our background, although there's the overlap into film, obviously with the subject matter, always kind of interested in kind of film studies and stuff like that. But, in writing the script, and my initial thought was to present it as a solo show. I'd seen a lot of performances in England at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, quite a large festival that obviously a lot of people do kind of know worldwide. And I'd seen a few things there that were about various comedians or figures, public figures, and these kind of interpretations, almost stage biopics, if you like, of Dan Laurel, Oliver Reed, the actor Oliver Reed, and these kind of really interesting performances. But it kind of suddenly hit on me that as I was writing it, that the slapstick element, relies so heavily on these duos. There is no, Laurel without Hardy, and actually within that, you have, although you have Chaplin or Harold Lloyd and Keaton as these individual figures, you can't really, you can't discredit their work around this sort of ensemble that, if you look at a Chaplin film, the ensemble that he created, or if you look at, Harold Lloyd, which is, who we're talking about today, you can't, have a lot of those sequences without Snub Pollard or without Mildred, and those interactions, whether they're the physical slapstick or just the romance element or the kind of the chaos and the action, they rely on that collaboration and that interaction with others. So that's where I decided, I'll play Harold Lloyd and Hayley can play everyone else.
Bingo.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
I've got your work cut out.
It works out great.
I do play a lot of characters. Yeah. And also, because we're actors, the struggling artist is very much a theme of the show. And
yeah, absolutely.
So, because Tommy's a writer, I'm an actor. It's like how we make ends meet, which is a lot of the sort of themes of the great film.
Yeah, and specifically bumping into Broadway, which we didn't actually, we hadn't seen it. I'd seen Safety Last, we'd watched The Freshman, and we were watching these films and weeks, over the weeks and the months that we were writing it. And then suddenly we genuinely stumbled across Bumping Into Broadway. And we were kind of like, oh, this is our life. And there was no, and that was, so our work, it existed. The originality of the idea was that, we actually had this, this concept and this show that existed prior to discovering Bumping Into Broadway, where you have these two characters, an actress and a writer. And actually that was already in there, and so that was kind of, it was kind of the serendipity of that was like almost quite surreal.
And just going off of what you originally asked about how we intertwine our lives in with the show. We were talking about earlier with you about it passing different generations and how nowadays kids can watch TikTok videos really fast things happening, and then it gets them into silent movies, and that's been passed down. A lot of our show is about how our dads and granddads and people before us told us all about silent movies. And
yeah, the legacy is so important.
How it brings everyone together as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most recent shows that we did towards the end of last year was at a festival near to Birmingham in a place called Droitwich. It was the Rick Mail Comedy Festival. For those, obviously I know you have international listeners, but for those that don't know, Rick Mail famously is known across the pond for the film Drop Dead Fred with Phoebe Cates, but he didn't quite become as worldly renowned, or at least break America as much as our friend Dudley Moore, or need I say it, James Corden. So in terms of the kind of the Brits abroad experience, but Rick Mail, famous for Blackadder, Bottom, The Young Ones. They had the first ever Rick Mail Comedy Festival last year, which we performed a version of our show at, which we're, as I said, Against the Clock, the Harold Lloyd show is continuing to develop. As even through this conversation, inspiring us. But performing that show there was so kind of crucial because, again, linking to that legacy and those characters, and how it connects kind of generations. Rick Mail and Ade Edmondson often talked in interviews that they formed as a comedy double act in their shows. The Young Ones, the Bottom, as a legacy that was connected to, along a kind of timeline that where you would, if you worked back, you would get to Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy. So, they are part of that kind of family tree of kind of comedy kind of double acts. And so that was really where, that was the hook in the end that we were sort of saying, well, where this new double act heading on tour, Tommy and Hayley, you've not heard of us before, but here we are, ta-da, and let's tell the story of Harold Lloyd 100 years ago and how that links to me working in Harrods, which I did for a year, and the department store experience of Harold Lloyd. So all these kind of, weird and wonderful parallels, and the chaos continues.
That's beautiful. I love British comedy. Fry and Laurie and the Goodies, and of course Python and Richard Simonton and we've been talking about the Goon Show quite a bit recently, and from what I understand, Spike Milligan and Harry Seacombe and Peter Sellers, I think, all were inspired by Laurel and Hardy. When did you notice that there was something more relational in the Harold Lloyd movies that was maybe a little bit more of a two-person act?
Well, I think it actually it did start with so it was 2016. My dad had written some music. He produces some music, and he produced a song with his writing partner, and it was called Real Tears. And it was a song about kind of picking yourself up when you get knocked down, and brushing yourself off and carrying on, and this kind of and as it kind of developed, actually, there's the sort of homophonic, that's the word, nature of the real as in genuine and real as in a film reel, and that sort of double meaning. But and so my dad had produced this song, when I was about 16, so yeah, well over 10 years, and he said I want it to be about a clown. I think we should make a music video. I mean, my family, my mum and brother, and then, as I say, Hayley came into the picture as the girl in quotes, much like Mildred Davis, and I was the boy, and we were there, and kind of we'd make these kind of videos in the garden or home movies, and my dad said, I just want this song to be about a clown. I don't know, Tommy, do you know any? Chaplin feels kind of too obvious. Is there anyone? And we kind of looked, and I know to the school library, and there was, Harry Langdon, and we were kind of saying, maybe someone that's kind of forgotten or kind of lesser known. And my dad said, well, what about Harold Lloyd? I mean, you kind of, pop the glasses on. Maybe there's a bit of a kind of resemblance there, maybe. I kind of said, I don't know, I don't think so. Maybe let's see. So kind of we put on these glasses, bought the straw boater, and it was all quite low tech, but I suppose high tech for most home movies. So we had this green screen, and had me dangling off of a clock. And my dad actually contacted at the time, the Harold Lloyd Entertainment, and they said that the footage could be used, for an educational purpose, which it was. My dad wasn't making any money from this song. It was just being put on YouTube as an education and in a way of promoting Harold Lloyd's story and legacy. And so but it existed just as about a 30-second demo, really, with just a small piece of footage and then kind of intercut with me as Harold Lloyd. And then kind of nothing kind of came about after that. And then suddenly and then it was in 2023 when it was the centenary of Safety Last, and the theatre where we now live was closing for renovation. It's an old town hall, and it has a big clock face. And we were standing in the town centre, and I kind of looked up at this clock, and I kind of said to myself, well, if I don't make this show now, I never will, because it's like now is the time. It's 2023. It's the centenary. It feels important. It feels like it's all kind of come together. And then, Harold Lloyd's stories, specifically in his films and his kind of life and work, just really resonated with this power dynamic of the relationships being interesting, as in on screen, but also Harold's story as someone who, although he didn't talk about it, the first thing people would find out when they look up was about his accident. And as you were saying with Generations and how you kind of came to know it and how other people kind of get Harold into their life, we found with the audiences when we performed it that there is a very specific age demographic that they really know about Harold Lloyd, because they remember coming home from school and watching in the UK, especially, I think, they seem to be very, very clued up on the fact that, I remember Harold Lloyd. I used to come home from school and I'd watch it, and it'd be Laurel and Hardy, and so my father, Hayley's dad, and that was a generation of people in their 60s and early 60s. That was, as in their age, they're in their early 60s. They were the people that really resonated with it, and that relationship of those characters that we've then tried to bring to the stage. Harold Lloyd with Hal Roach, Harold with Mildred, and then also later the fact that Harold also, we've not actually touched on it in the show as of yet, but his work with Lucille Ball and the Old Gold Comedy Theatre, and that again, those kind of linking back to Hayley with those female figures of comedy and the influences that they've had. So that was a real hook for us, is that double act.
And I think as well, because like you were saying, Brad, about how relatable his stories are, we very much relate with the idea of the underdog and sort of really trying to make ends meet, and we very much relate to that, don't we?
Yeah, I know just the kind of the theme of the fact that he's always on the go, and and that we're constantly
back up and he does it again, and he never.
Yeah, and I think that pace which Lloyd found, which I think you do see in his films more than in again, it doesn't. Obviously, there is always that comparison of Chaplin and Keaton films. Then there were others that made films in those times that we obviously people don't know as well. But with that, I think his sort of pace of life, which then is quite akin to the British program Some Mothers Do Have, which was made in the 70s, isn't it, 80s, and that was kind of an ancestor of all of that kind of slapstick and the kind of hanging off the back of a bus, and so we're really trying to work out now how can we push that slapstick even further. Is that like our show really has the story, so which other interpretations of other shows that I've seen about Chaplin or Keaton, often they kind of really focus on there's a great company here in the UK that have got a show currently called Buster, and they really focus on the physical theatre aspect. Or in Australia, Marcel Cole, who does Chaplin, and again his show has been celebrated for its kind of how it relates to the physical and his performance as a physical performer, as well as the story. But for me, as a Chaplin fan, I actually found his story is so vast, it's kind of hard to pinpoint, an aspect of Chaplin's life. And then equally, by the flip side, it's also a story that's been told, and told again and in various ways. So for us, it was about, okay, how can we bring Harold's story to life? Someone who, people might say, oh, yeah, I know the name Harold Lloyd, but yeah, they might not really know, or they might have some sense of, was there an accident in 1919, or but they're beyond that, they might not really have any more information. So that's what we're hoping to do, is tell the kind of the real story of the creative genius as well as the man himself.
Absolutely. And to that end, how do you feel like your physical theater training applies?
It's really about how we can, try to get across this story that in one moment can make you laugh, and then in the next instant, move you and kind of, make you cry. I think that's what we really do try to capture in the sort of, I should say, the first act, because we actually performed the show. The last time we performed it, last year, we performed it at a film festival in Yorkshire, in South Yorkshire, at the Penistone Film Festival, and we actually performed the show as a sort of 2-act show, which was the first time that we'd actually done that. And at the end of Act 1, we really found this moment of, Harold's been through so much. He was at the top of his game, and he's just about to make this film, and now this obviously this event has occurred, which, although is not his whole life, it's an aspect of it. Obviously, dramatically, it is something which it happened to him, and it forms part of that. To omit it from the narrative, would almost be, it seems a bit of an injustice, even though he himself, didn't necessarily readily talk about it so openly. Although there are some interviews and records of it. Yeah, so we kind of don't want that sort of aspect to be the focus, but it does certainly form part of that story, and using the kind of physical theatre training, as you say, Hayley, has really helped to kind of, we're watching the films to kind of find those little intricate details, just those small nods. I mean, for example, in our kind of opening number that we have, a sort of song and dance, I think we've worked in some kind of physical references to, and as you say, almost in that kind of TikTok way, those little dance moves that, I think we've got Laurel and Hardy in there.
Fantastic.
There's Max Wall.
Oh, wow.
There's the Morecambe and Wise.
Oh, yeah.
So there's all these little almost Easter eggs within the physicality as well as within the words that are written. And I think that's what we want to try and do, is that we want to create this kind of, we want to create a kind of multiverse, if you will, that is kind of accessible. Because I think what Hayley and I have talked a lot about, theatre and accessibility is important to us. And you need to be able to connect with people on lots of different levels. And I use that kind of multiverse metaphor as an example of when you watch maybe a Spider-Man film, you might have to have, I have friends who say, no, but you don't need to have seen all of the 7 Spider-Man films before that to have a full sense of what's coming next. But, so there's always something for someone, but we want to be able to reach a point with our show where, someone might pick on, oh, that's a reference to, Hal Roach, the fact that he later went to work with Laurel and Hardy, or this is a reference to this, but it's not, you might not get everything, but there's always going to be something to someone. I don't know if you'd agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you said it all. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. But I mean, silent movie people, and I certainly know how to talk a lot, but Hayley's an expert at the mind.
And I feel like in our show, whether I'm playing a woman or actually playing a man, I'm still a female. So a lot of our show actually is quite interesting, because I play a character called the Usher. We've just named the Usher. I play them as a male, but actually the importance of this made-up character throughout the show kind of drives the action, and it does mirror that kind of figure for Harold or Tommy in our show. And I think as well, from a personal aspect, as the actor, like Tommy said earlier, we put our things together, because if I just had the choreography or if I just had the physical aspect, it would be nothing without the writing, and vice versa. Helps to make that come alive, I think.
I think that it's complementing each other, and as Mildred and Lloyd do in Safety Last, for example, as obviously that was the original focus, and also it being arguably one of the at least most well known of his, and that's the sort of reference for people of him on the clock. And I think the fact that certainly in that story there's just constantly passing ships and then eventually aligning. I think that is really what it's taking kind of influence from the narrative, not necessarily from the actual what happens, but just those feelings that occur. So like, in those kind of narrative techniques, rather than like what actually happened, it's to do with like the fact that in a lot of those films, in some way or another, there's these kind of worlds that are kind of running alongside each other but aren't quite colliding. Even with Harold in The Freshman, him being this sort of outsider of not feeling necessarily like in the right place, and not feeling like he necessarily belongs there, or trying to constantly make himself feel kind of worthy of this situation. So I'll try football, I'm going to give this speech, and I'm going to go to this party, and all these scenarios, and then eventually finding the way to have that resolution and marriage at the end of I've completed this. And it's kind of got that whole. The whole is then at the end complete.
Can I add something?
Please.
Kind of.
The ship is passing, and there's aligned, and it's arrived at the dock, and here it is. And then I've let you forget it. Comedy all the time.
So also, when we were talking about the double act nature of lots of our inspirations, they're often male. So it's quite nice to have the fact that we've got this double act going on for us, which is very similar to Harold Lloyd's films when he's got all of the wonderful actresses in his stories. It's quite nice that we can play off each other because we know each other so well, and we have that off-stage relationship as well, much like Harold did with Mildred. We can bounce off each other. I can set the jokes up for Tommy to land, very much like in his film. Yeah, and I think that is the aspect is that obviously, as you know, and as you've talked about, with other people on the podcast, and in general, the idea that certainly the female role within cinema and within comedy, acting as there's this girl here, and it's the objective for Chaplin in making a living or whatever it might be is to get the girl. But actually, here we are, and we're saying the female role, although that might be like an aspect of the narrative that he does eventually get the girl, and that is maybe one of the driving forces. But actually, as I think you've discussed before, is that again Mildred. It doesn't exist just as this kind of figure or this doll. She actually has an active driving force to the narrative, and I think that's really what we're interested in. You can't really have one without the other. And although Harold is that male figure, as the sort of saying goes, behind every great man, there's a Hayley, so it's like, so Mildred, or and I don't know about that.
So it's balancing those kind of modern sensibilities and kind of juggling that in relation to some more like traditional ideas, and actually challenging some of those things, whilst also paying homage to something which is obviously oldie worldy for some younger people. That's like why would I be interested in a story that's about some people that are filmed in black and white? But it's actually the themes and the ideas that are ultimately timeless and universal.
Hayley, would you say that behind every great woman is a Harold or a Tommy slapping around?
Oh, I'm definitely flapping.
So tell us about that. How does the physical training in theater prepare you to do slapstick on stage like that and not hurt yourself? Because you have to do it basically like the music hall vaudevillians did in real life anyway, because you're using your bodies on stage just like they were when you're paying homage to them. How do you not hurt yourself?
Yeah, we definitely in rehearsal think about that, because obviously when you're filming something, you can cut, do it again, or make it look like it's happening when it's not. So actually that was quite a learning curve in rehearsal, to actually do things safely and not hurt each other.
Yeah.
Or like fake it perhaps to make it look like we're doing something on stage, but from the angle of the audience, which is very different to the viewer watching it on screen.
Yeah, we definitely want to, like, one of the things that we, in these conversations, like with yourself and with our kind of ongoing research, we really want to push the slapstick more and more. That is one of the aspects, because, we have really kind of focused in on the narrative and the origin story and him growing up and, meeting Hal Roach. And so we have all those kind of traditional kind of dramatic ideas in there, but actually, that's not really our world. So, kind of me standing up there and doing my interpretation of Harold, although no one really, unless you are a super fan, you're not necessarily going to know what he sounds like, and I've tried to study his accent and listen to videos and interviews, but a lot of those interviews are when he's an older man, so that's kind of interesting to me, as to I'm portraying this character and I need to get this kind of story across. But we definitely want to try and, as we're developing it further, work in more slapstick moments, planks of wood, or it may be have Hal Roach and Harold Lloyd having a conversation, but this conversation almost feels like a kind of argument. Are they in a kind of boxing ring, kind of like the Milky Way? So there are ways that, again, that we can have these kind of references, but then also trusting in the kind of the script and the kind of poetry of the text, which uses quite a lot of rhyming that I've written. That when he's explaining, well, as Hayley said, this Usher character is explaining, who, although as Hayley said, she plays as a kind of male character, because I did want to touch on that a little bit more, which is the importance of that character as a representation of Harold as a young boy, worked as an usher in in the theatre, and that was kind of his starting out, but also this kind of almost Jerry Lewis slapstick character that when he doesn't speak, is actually quite, Hayley with the usher's hat and the button. It's quite a gender neutral character, really, and actually.
Yeah, I imagine them as a boy, but maybe it doesn't come across.
Yeah, but obviously the part of our European studies, as you were asking, a lot of that was about not only the physicality, but also looking at politics in performance and kind of gender studies, and so there was a lot of analysis as well as all of the kind of fun, clowny physical stuff. We both studied in Spain as part of an Erasmus, a study abroad, and in studying abroad in Spain, again, it was then that reaffirming of the idea that Hayley studied in Murcia and all the classes were taught in Spanish. So, Hayley had to learn through physicality.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, how interesting.
Yeah, that was a slight tangent, but I did have to learn pantomime and mime just purely by watching, because it was so visual, because I didn't have a clue what was happening.
Oh, that's not a tangent at all. That is like right to the heart of everything, really, isn't it? Because this whole thing about being a universal language. And this is stuff going back, I guess, to almost like medieval times in terms of the Commedia dell'arte and all these things, I guess, that you're tapping into there. That is fascinating to learn that and then bring it home and take Spanish techniques.
To then try and, again, to get that then back out to, maybe one day an American audience that will obviously appreciate, and I think that's the thing. I think we're at a stage now where we're kind of saying, well, who is the story who is the story for, and and who would find it interesting, and the answer is people that, as you were saying, that love of Monty Python, or the group Beyond the Fringe that came over to America, to Broadway at one stage, and brought their British slapstick and sketch comedy over. That is something where we're kind of going, well, yes, there's a generation of men and women who we're meeting at our shows who are going, oh, I didn't know that about Harold Lloyd. That's amazing. Oh my God. I just remember maybe watching this thing, and maybe it was kind of on telly, and it was on the television. It was with Lauren and Hardy, but then also going, oh, but actually this is an American hero. This is an American story, and actually, so then it's kind of, we're asking ourselves, well, what are we? Who are we to tell this story as kind of two quote unquote young Brits, in their 30s, kind of going, well, why is that interesting to us? And it's kind of saying, well, actually, it's because, yes, he is an American, a good citizen, Oscar, honorary Oscar award, but he is still a universal character that isn't American really, or British or Spanish or wherever. He is understood, the world over, and that's interesting to us.
Also, in our show, a slapstick aside, I think we use a lot of prop comedy. Can you call it that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
We like a lot of props to tell the story, to put across it to the audience, and being clowns as well. It's really important to listen to the audience and what they give you in response, which might be slightly different to how you do it on screen, because obviously there's no immediate feedback. You don't get it straight away, or maybe you do from the director, but not from your audience. So in terms of coming back to the whole how we use that second in our show, definitely how we listen to our audience has the clowning technique too, because at the beginning of the show, the usher character, the audience are welcomed in by the usher. We're not actually the usher of the venue wherever we're performing, but they think it is.
You're kind of transported into the 1920s, and that's really what we want to do. Is we want to just transport people to this kind of other world, much like almost like Buster Keaton's Cameraman. This idea of literally stepping out of the screen. I think that's kind of what we want to continue to explore, is how we can live and kind of step out of the screen, and these characters can be brought to life on stage, and always constantly kind of asking ourselves the question, well, what is the story that we're trying to tell? And actually that is constantly evolving.
It has changed.
That's always really interesting. It's, the more we have different interactions with people, and the films that we watch of Harold's and documentaries, and suddenly it's like, that's an interesting aspect of the narrative.
Figuring out what story it is we want to tell.
Yeah, and also what other stories people are going to take away for themselves as well.
Absolutely. And so how you take the audience feedback and then evolve the show. Since 2023, how has the show morphed, would you say?
Yeah, please.
At the beginning, actually, our show was very different in terms of focus. Much like Harold with his accident with his hand, we had something quite personal to us that we kind of related to in that sense. Tommy, maybe you want to say, but we can relate to having like a disability or something missing that was there before. With Tommy, he actually has part of his brain missing.
Yeah, we're still looking for it. So that's one of the reasons why we do podcasts and TV, kind of interviews and stuff, and the social media. So if you find it, I don't know, it might be over there. I don't know with you. But so I was so Hayley put the call out for everyone. So I was born without a part of my brain called the corpus callosum, and it connects the two hemispheres of the brain. And it kind of, in the kind of modern sense of the word, it would be considered, a kind of neurodivergent. And it's something which I've kind of lived with, but haven't kind of been necessarily sort of defined by, being that it's something kind of internal. It's not something that ever really came up in conversation, and has kind of affected me in some ways, and has not affected me in other ways that maybe it could have. And because it kind of everyone's experience of it can be different, and the research is actually quite limited. It's the film Rain Man, with Dustin Hoffman famously. The character that Dustin Hoffman plays is based on someone who originally they thought the character that they based his role on had this condition, but actually then had another condition that was quite similar, but was actually different. So I kind of grew up thinking, what I was told that Albert Einstein had no corpus callosum. So then I thought maybe I could be some kind of child genius. Turns out, then they did a bit more research. They found Einstein's brain. Now, they haven't found mine, but they found Einstein's brain, and it turns out that Einstein actually had an enlarged corpus callosum. So he had he just had a really big one. So lucky him. But that obviously was what made him kind of brainy. So then I guess, yeah, as Hayley said, that the starting point, it's always comedy. The starting point was seeing this correlation and this parallel between this thing that was about me that I wasn't kind of shouting about, and I was being creative, doing comedy, doing shows. I often, as a sideline, one of my many kind of jobs that, as Hayley and I said in the show, we talk about this sort of juggling act of working as drama teachers or working as doing kids' parties, and this constant kind of self-employed kind of acting life. One of the things that I do is I play Manuel in the 40 Towers. They have in the UK. Sometimes they head over to the dinner show where I play the Spanish waiter Manuel. Wow. And in this slapstick and the falling over, and I've kind of had to navigate the idea that the corpus callosum condition can affect your coordination, kind of some of your kind of personality aspects. And, so when I kind of tell people when I was younger, I think I actually got this bit of me kind of missing, and people, quite harshly, unkindly might be kind of like, oh, that kind of makes sense. You're a bit crazy. You're always kind of clumsy and falling over. And it's kind of like going, actually, no, that's sort of like part of my, yes, I am a bit, I literally fell over in the gym yesterday, but that's another story. It's part of me, but it's also part of my work as well as a clown. And
I think you definitely used it.
Yeah, so using it to my advantage and the positive, and much like Harold Lloyd ultimately didn't stop. He didn't let this thing in his life, this moment, impact him. Even from his hospital bed, was thinking I might become a director. So it was never going to give up, and I think that resilience. So again, even if we don't really touch on this brain condition, if you will, in the show anymore.
But the theme of resilience.
Yeah. So it was about how we kind of shape the script, and in answer to your original question, how, much of my brain is about kind of the way it works and those pathways that I am often literally going around the houses, trying to find the connection, trying to kind of get to the point, and that's part of my kind of world. And then as you were saying earlier, you've got Harold, who's kind of constantly on the run, on the go. And then it's with Mildred and these other characters that kind of come in, they kind of bring him back. They bring him back home. They bring him back to safety, to his kind of to the nest, and everything's okay again. So I think that's sort of what initially that was one of the aspects of the show. And then in kind of more recent years, it's been about how we, in the writing, it's been, yes, that resilience, but also that resilience in relation to kind of loss and grief, again, which is something we've personally experienced, as many people do, but also, obviously, again, as Harold did, and again, although we don't explicitly say that, we don't need to talk about that aspect of his life or an aspect of our life in a really kind of obvious way. Those themes are still there and present. So I think as it's evolved, it's been about, as you say, it's been about that resilience and about, being knocked back, whether that be through a personal life experience and then taking it to use it as your kind of your strength and your superpower, and literally be the inspiration for Clark Kent and then be hanging off of a clock, you know, to really take it to those extremes when you're faced with kind of adversity, you know. And there is one Harold Lloyd kind of quote that again, although we haven't always used it as verbatim in the show, again, it kind of exists within us, is that idea that you see someone carrying a box or a bag. I'm heavily misquoting here, but you know, and you see them fall over. You know, they try and catch their hat in the wind. You know, someone hammers a nail and then they mash their finger in the process. We laugh at those things because they're, as Harold said, they're kind of human touches, and I think that's really what we try to do is as the show's developed, whatever story we're telling or whatever narrative we're kind of weaving, we're trying to touch people in some way and make them realize that they too have experienced these hardships, and also all of the really positive stuff as well, like us getting married, which again happened to Harold and Mildred in 1923, and 100 years later, almost just about a month off to the day, we got married as well.
Wow, that is fantastic. And you opened your theater on April 1st.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Strange but true.
And in 2023, on the 100th anniversary of Safety Lab.
Yeah, and I mean, it's obviously some of the things were kind of planned and not always coincidental, but, you know, we have been very lucky to perform it in lots of lovely places. You know, in small rooms below pubs in Edinburgh, up to, you know, into big old cinema kind of theatres in South Yorkshire and beyond. I mean, one of our like favourite shows that we did was after we came back from the Edinburgh Fringe was in the Cinema Museum. Remember that one, Hayley?
Oh.
Yeah, we booked in the Cinema Museum in London, and it's the former workhouse of Charlie Chaplin. So it was just this amazing opportunity, and I had lots of Chaplin memorabilia. And for Tommy, this was like huge, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we both just could realise the significance of the fact that, I mean, obviously within the show, we do originally start to talk about that context. We talk about Keaton and Chaplin, which Hayley plays both of those characters, as well as Hal Roach, Mildred Davis, Jabina Wilson, the usher, B.B. Daniels. Shall I go on? There's been I think Hayley's played up to 20 characters at one stage in the show. And they might just be small snippets, doctors, but it's, you know, and she pops on a hat. I'm not undermining what you do.
No. I'm happy with 20, no more, please. No, I love it. It's great. It's actually really fun trying to play lots of different.
That's quite a challenge, yeah, especially when you have such a short lead time in between changes, I would guess.
Yeah, it takes a lot of preparation, but also it's quite nice because it contrasts with Tommy playing consistently the same character throughout. I think it's quite a nice dynamic because it's kind of symbolic of the chaos of life, you know, keep changing, different jobs that we have to do all the time to make ends meet, and then having this consistency throughout, which is Tommy's character.
So you can kind of interpret, basically you can try out all kinds of different material, and you have a through line that you can base it on and hang it through audience reactions about moving things around to what works best when, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, as you said it when you were saying about what's changing with the audience feedback, one of the things that's just come to mind is one audience member absolutely adored the show, but wrote a nice kind of message and comment on Facebook saying you should mention Harold's Christmas tree, you know. So there was kind of, you know, these little things that people did know that it's like, well, you can't include everything, right. You know. We try to kind of, again, it's especially in theatre, it's like how much can we, you know, and so much, you know, detail that, you know, him again, that sort of link to him and Superman, or I
think it's nice as well that because not everybody does know as much about Harold Lloyd than they do Chaplin and Owen Hardy or Keaton. I think it's also nice that we tell them things, but also that they can go away and do some more research themselves. We give them ideas so that they can go, oh, actually, I'm going to look into that a bit more.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think the fact that we're obviously performing it as a kind of stage narrative, again, that then you've then got all of that source material to then go to and go, all right, they were sort of doing something that was kind of like, movie crazy in that moment, or, The Freshman, then these little kind of homages, then little nods that they can kind of see. We're not ripping anything off. We're not copying anything. It's made with kind of love, and it's made with, when we've been chatting to different people about it, it's about really paying tribute to him and his work and the people that he came into contact with. Because I think that's one of the things, as a sort of Chaplin fan, I think that's one of the things that frustrates me, is that although he had worked with so many amazing people, Chaplin never mentioned one of them in his autobiography. And it wasn't this kind of one-man band. And I think that's sort of when the ego kind of comes into it, and when you actually look at it and go, actually, there's this man, Harold, who knows that he didn't do it alone, and he talked very openly about how, it was a kind of team effort, and that there was all these people involved, and the writers and the directors, and those relationships that he formed, even in the sort of some of the research and that we've done, where there's sort of drama of Harold saying that he came up with the glasses character, and and Hal saying that it was him, and that's kind of playful and quite, they were relatively amicable. They worked together for a very long time. So
Yeah.
Yes, there's that sort of that drama, and obviously there are certain things that are going to be kind of, there are a lot of Laurel and Hardy fans that aren't, a huge fan of the Laurel and Hardy film adaptation that was done recently, because it's so kind of factually incorrect. But there are going to be things that you're going to have to kind of edit in some way to tell the story. But for the most part, I think we've really tried to be faithful to the source material, not only of the films but of his life as well. Because especially now in the sort of world we live in, where it's hard to tell what's real and what's fake, we want to tell a real, authentic story with real human people. There is no AI included.
I worked in theater for 8 years, and I really believe now more than ever that people who can play instruments and act on stage in front, that's going to be like the biggest new thing that everybody's going to be into pretty soon, because more and more people are just getting so turned off by the AI that they really are wanting to go back to concerts, see something on stage, or to see some kind of event with other real people, just to kind of get that interaction that they've been missing.
Absolutely. And that's what we're all about, making those connections, just like we have with you today, across the radio waves and time zones. And as Harold Lloyd said, his films cross language barriers and the time barrier too. And we've done just that today with you. No, it's been brilliant.
The Man in the Glasses is a production of Harold Lloyd Entertainment, entirely without AI. Music by Robert Israel. To find out more, go to haroldlloyd.com, the official Harold Lloyd Facebook and Instagram pages, or contact us at haroldlloydpodcast@gmail.com. Next time, Annette D'Agostino Lloyd takes us back to Harold's early days, growing up in school, on the stage, and on the streets of Nebraska, Colorado, and finally California, and when Harold went from his last nickel to his first movie. Can you believe you used to get a donut for 5 cents?
All he needed was self-motivation, and the rest would really kind of almost take care of itself, and it always did for him. Even when difficult things happened, tragic things happened, it all wound up to be for the betterment of him or of his circumstances.